glad everybody is here. As you know, this is a live Q&A. So we want to open it up so that we answer your questions. And in order to do that, you have to put them there in the question below. You can also tweet them out with the hashtag #OurDaily, and we'll be sure to get to those. But that being said, I'm just going to jump into it. Here is Jim Stroud. I've known you for a long time, but why don't you tell people a little bit more about you?
I'm a Gemini. I like long walks in the park.
Thanks.
I've been in the sourcing field since 1997, so about 20 years. Yeah, I've been doing this about 20 years. Such companies as Microsoft, Google, Siemens, MCI, host of startup companies. Presently, I serve at the pleasure of Randstad SourceRight. I am the global head of recruiting and sourcing here. In that role, I fix a multitude of sourcing and recruiting issues for our clients and assist the sales team, and also share different thought leadership.
I appreciate that. I was actually going to show the picture of like the first time we met, but I couldn't.
Oh, wow, you have that?
2008, maybe? I don't know. Anyway, I was going to show it. It's really funny. I'll show it. I'll put it up on my Facebook, and for friends, people can see it. But okay. So everybody knows how this conversation started. Jim and I have been friends for a long time. I used to idolize him. He was the first recruiter on Vine. He was the first recruiter using YouTube. He was also like the first self-deprecating recruiter that would share hits and misses so that we could all grow from them. Yeah. And so later, as we were having this conversation, we started talking about machine learning, because it comes up now more than ever in these conversations. And we started kind of hitting on the topic because I had gone to a conference recently, and they had said that using machine learning is awesome because there's absolutely no way for computers to be biased. What do you think?
That is funny. It's funny to me because I've been doing some research on it, and it's sort of on the edge of funny / scary how this stuff is, because, and it's not that it's malicious intent at all. It's all like unintended consequences, you know? And people have been talking about it for a while, even the past few years, and I think I'm just sort of slow to the bandwagon, but now I'm definitely on the bandwagon, looking at this a bit more. There was, I don't know if I mentioned this to you, Jackie, but there was this student in Sweden, and he was some sort of design student or something like that, and so he would look for images online to use in his various projects. And so he did a search for hands. And when he did a search for hands, he always found just white hands. He never found, in the Google results, you didn't see black hands or Asian hands or Hispanic hands. There was always white hands. So he thought, why was that? Why is it that is the different multitudes of races there are in the world? How come only white hands were in the search results? So he launched this project called the World Wide Web. WorldWideWeb.net, and look it up. It's really interesting. So what he wants to do with this site is that he has pictures of different colored hands, and he wants people to start using these pictures of different colored hands and link to them and share them, so that the Google algorithm will start showing a diversity of different images for hands. You know, he did this a couple years ago. I did a search just now. I don't know if it's necessarily working, but I thought it was interesting that he did that. And then, as we were talking, you mentioned to me this one article about how, I think it's Alexa or Amazon Echo doesn't recognize your voice if you have certain dialects,
right.
Which is really interesting and scary. And then I also, in the article that I wrote, it's on jimstroud.com, where I cited different Google examples. And again, these are all like unintended consequences, right. But I think it's what really makes the whole machine learning and algorithm thing kind of scary. Like there's an example where someone was doing a search for gorillas, and black people's faces showed up as being the Google search engine thought that black people were gorillas because it kept showing their pictures in there. I did a search earlier today because this happened actually a couple of years back. I did a search yesterday, and I didn't see it so much. I did see a couple here and there still, but it wasn't like it was before, so Google, I guess, cleaned it up. Now, that wasn't to say that Google as a company thinks black people are gorillas and put them in image search. It is to say that the machine, for some reason, thought that. And then there were other examples in Google, too, that really I thought were really interesting, is that if you did a search for unprofessional hairstyles, then you're finding by face, you're going to see only African-American women. Well, you might see a couple of other races in here and there, but overwhelmingly, you see African-American people. And I thought that was interesting because Google as a company don't think that African-American women are unprofessional in their various hairstyles. They think it represents diversity, but Google, the machine, does. So then I started looking. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I don't think people recognize the pattern. And, one of the things, some of you who may only know me from the Recruiting Daily may not know Jackie, the diversity writer. So I used to write about diversity for another publication. You like the way I said that? For another publication. And the rules that I was given, or the parameters, was that I don't write about black women, which at first I was like, but the reason was because there are so many different diverse groups. And of course you look at the things that are personal to you, but you Google wheelchair and see how many things come up about people being handicapped, or Google, some of the other marginalized groups, and you don't see, you might be surprised on what comes up. You remember how back in the day, I don't know, we used to say, like, what would an alien think if they came to your house, right?
Yeah, right.
There used to actually be a show where it was like, if somebody came to your house and looked at everything, what would they find and what would their perception be? And I think that for some people, they ask, why would, for people that aren't marginalized, you don't really notice because it doesn't affect you. And when you are falling into those groups, you notice straight away. It's like when you buy a white car, you see all the white cars. When you buy a red car, you see all the red cars. But that's what the impression is. And so it's tough. I have a question already, but it was like, how can teams avoid inserting bias when implementing new technology? Because we're seeing that the technology is actually moving, not, in a biased way. And that's kind of what we want to kind of get to is talking about how teams can avoid inserting bias if they can.
Yeah, a couple of suggestions on that. One is, I know from, I don't remember exactly who did the research, but you probably have heard of it. If you applied for a job and you have a traditional African-American name like Darnell or something, or Rashid, you're less likely to get picked for a job if your name is Ellen or something, right? Clear bias in that regard. And so when I heard about that report, first question I had is, why are you scanning the names anyway? What do they have to do with the skill set of the job? Certain things should not even be scanned for. Maybe not even scanned for schools, or maybe rank that a little bit lower because certain schools are historically black or historically Hispanic, whatever. So maybe that may be a part of it. I don't know. But the other underlying part of why I think a lot of the machine learning is leaning towards biasness is because of this tool. I don't know if it's a tool, it's a process, but it's called word stemming. Mm-hmm. And basically what word stemming is that the machine will look at words and see what are commonly associated with those words. There's an article that I'll give it to you maybe to post in the comments of this when this recording goes on your website. But there's this report that was reported on The Guardian about this tool that uses word stemming. And so what it would do is it will look at different news articles, it will look at different web content, and it'll say, okay, when people mention the word flowers, the word pleasant is near it, or daisies are near it, or roses, or love, you know. So those are words that commonly are associated with the word flower in the context of all the things that the machine saw. Now, when it looked for words like female, I'm going to read from this article here. It says, the latest paper shows that some more troubling implicit biases seen in human psychology experiments are also readily acquired by algorithms. The words female and woman were more closely associated with the arts and humanities and occupations related to the home, while words such as male and man were closer to math and engineering professions. And then the AI system was also more likely to associate European American names with pleasant words such as gift or happy, whereas African American names were more commonly associated with unpleasant words, right? So the machine in itself is not per se saying, how can I rig this against different groups of people? It's saying that in the data set that it evaluated, which are news articles and online content, that is what the machine is taking away from it. And so the danger of that is one, once this tool set is in place and other people are building tools that do something similar, they're going to take from these open source tools and use some of their data in theirs to make it easy for them to make their tool. And when they do that, they're taking in the biases, the unintended biases that the open source tool already has in place. So with that. And then one more point is that I think it would be interesting, because I don't think we have, from what I've looked, I was looking for this yesterday. There's not a regulation agency or some sort of independent party that just sort of regulates or checks these algorithms for bias.
That's right.
Just put it out there and they say our machine is wonderful, it does all these wonderful things, but no one really checks it to see if it's being biased or discriminatory in some way.
Now, I think I want to make sure that I'm going to give a very 5-year-old discussion of how machine learning works, so that we're all on level playing field, so you can make sure that what we're saying, and as you ask questions, you know the machine learning that we're talking about. So back in the day, when you taught a program, a computer program, you mapped up all the steps. You would say, turn right, go right 2 steps, turn left, go left 2 steps, for example, in order to teach something. And instead, so for example, if we were teaching a computer how to make spaghetti, we would say, grab a pan, put the water, put it on the pan. What machine learning does is we show them the perfect bowl of spaghetti. So it will say, this is a bowl, I recognize this as a bowl of spaghetti. If you put a picture of SpaghettiOs on it, it does not recognize it as spaghetti because it doesn't look the same and it doesn't have the same similarities. There's no common thread. So machines are looking for the common thread, so that now it sounds amazing, but only this year have you been able to say, show me a picture of somebody with an orange shirt. So you're not going to get pictures of oranges. It knows what an orange shirt is. So on that stretch, if we're telling a computer, find me the perfect candidate, it's based on us saying, this is what a perfect candidate looks like. For example, there's a tool that people use, and then we hear about it a lot on HireTool. We hear about the tool, and it says, let me find the perfect candidate based on the job description of what that looks like. And it takes it, uses an algorithm, and uses words so we can find what it looks like, and, you know, and it's using like Boolean, very generic, standard stuff in order to find it. Where the fear comes in is if we say a perfect candidate is an African-American woman from Waco, Texas, then you're going to be challenged because that's all it's going to show you. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of where we're talking about. Dan Laux asked a question. He said, "This is probably a small question with a big answer." Uh-oh, I think we're in trouble. But how can we fix this AI bias that is occurring? Like, and I think you mentioned part of it is having a regulatory group. I never even thought about that, to regulate what's going on with artificial intelligence. But any other?
Yeah, there's actually, I mentioned about having a regulatory body because in the UK, there is a movement going on around that. People are recognizing the inherent power that these algorithms are having, and they want to have some kind of agency in place to watchdog it. So in the UK, they're starting to talk about it. In the EU, European Union, they're starting to talk about it now. So that is certainly one way. And then there's another, gosh, I don't remember the name, but it's on my blog post on jimstroud.com. But there is somebody who is starting a company all geared around just evaluating the different algorithms, you know. So I think it probably will have to be a law in some ways that says that people have the right to see or the right to know how an algorithm kept them away from a certain opportunity. You know, I think the nearest equivalent might be Fair Credit Reporting Act. You know,
Right.
Everybody gets to see their credit report. You know, so you have an idea as to why you didn't get that loan or whatever reason. You get some idea from Fair Credit Reporting Act. So if a company says we are not discriminatory, we have a magic robot who evaluates our candidates, and then we'll evaluate from that to remove bias, then we should have the right as a candidate to say, okay, well, tell me basically how does your algorithm work, because you are sifting through the data that I gave you, and I want to know what in my data might have dissuaded your magic robot from giving me this opportunity. And so there's nothing in law that says that now. And actually, there's a system that law enforcement are using called Compass that what it does is that it can check your facial recognition. It'll match your face up against people's pictures in the driver's motor vehicle and in arrest reports to sort of see if you are a bad guy, that kind of thing. Those systems have been in place for a little while now, certainly in Los Angeles and in Texas and a few other places. But these systems, although they work fairly well, pretty well when I read, they're not 100% accurate.
Right.
So imagine that you're in a shopping mall and one of these hidden police surveillance cameras catches your face and it says you look like this other person who's a serial killer. And that being the case, we'll come by and just swoop you up. And so you tell the police, I'm not the serial killer. And they say, well, that's not what our magic robot machine tells us, so now we're going to detain you. And that's something that could foreseeably happen, because there is no agency in place to just sort of say, hey, are these facial recognition machines, are they 100%? It just takes 1% to ruin somebody's day or to get someone arrested, which we call damage to their reputation and any number of things. So I feel like I got on a tangent there.
No, that's okay. That's okay. As a side note, as I always say, I could talk about this all day. I know we have 10 minutes. If you have questions, I can't believe we only have 10 minutes. It seems like we just got.
Wow.
I think that's all the time when we talk. But if you do have questions, add them now, or I'll make sure maybe we can stay on a little bit longer, and you can, it'll be the after show. But there's a lot of problems with those algorithms. One of the things I've talked about before is a product. Oh, let me throw this in there. If I throw out products, I review them, it's not an endorsement. But there's two things that I want to discuss. One of them was Data Selfie. And Data Selfie is a college program that will allow you, it lays on top of Facebook, and it tells you who you interact with most, what groups you are most, but then it also makes an assessment on what your religion is, what it assumes that your your political beliefs are, and it will tell you whether it thinks you're a man and or a woman just based on everything you say. And I remember me and Katrina Kivin and Matt Charney were laughing one day when we were looking at my numbers as editor for Recruiting Tools. And at the time, 76% of my audience were white males between 26 and 35 or something like that. And I was like, oh shit, like, you know, Matt was like, you don't even resonate with your own people. And I was like, I have to take myself completely off the diversity talking circuit because I don't know how to communicate like that. And my data selfie says that 76% of my communication is more masculine than feminine because of the words. I don't know. Is it cuss words? I don't know. And so for people like me, or I don't know what part of that is, but if there was an algorithm implemented to find a black woman that is, you know, like who is of Christian means, you would pass me up. You wouldn't even see me.
Right. Right. Right.
Like, I mean, like, now to keep in mind, we're not saying, and Dan said, oh no, I'm bummed out about artificial intelligence. This isn't every artificial intelligence. The reminder is it's only as good as the information you put in.
Yeah.
And I went to SAP Sapphire this year, and what I found interesting, they have a whole, like, recruiting without bias. It's global, which makes it challenging because they have different norms all over the country.
Yep.
I kind of snickered because the head of global diversity is, you know, in Germany, and we know in Germany they have their own bias issues that are similar but not exact to the same that we have in the United States. But they built in anti-bias detection in their software.
Really?
Including success factors. And I asked them if it was something that you have to just turn on or turn off. And they were like, no. It red flags and tells that based on this decision, there could be some unconscious bias used. Like, that's as simple as you said. You don't turn it on or turn it off. It's a part of their software. I will tell everybody, and this is not supposed to be a plug, but I will be at the Success Factors conference in Vegas next week, and I will be coming back talking about that because I think they're one of the few that actually have built it into the software. But I said all that to say, do you think that it would be helpful to write or do you think it's even possible to write an anti-discriminatory algorithm, or would that in itself be biased in an opposite direction?
I think it would be biased in an opposite direction because who could write that? Because everybody has a different background, everybody has a different experience. My experience is different from your experience is different from somebody else's experience. And so it's like, what is the standard? I mean, how can you write something that's totally equal for all? I mean, I think there's a utopian mindset that says, yeah, it can be done, but once it's put in the algorithm, the unintended consequences would happen. I think I'll be really curious to see that software you mentioned that says it already has the anti-bias in it, how they program that algorithm together. And I also wonder, the people who did that, do they have something in place for alterations and updates? You know, so maybe they put it all together perfectly, and then they put it into practice, and they're still getting some issues. So then they go back and they put more, they tweak it a bit more. I'm wondering how often do companies even think about tweaking their algorithms around this particular topic. I wonder how often Google does. You know, Google actually, man, that's a company that I use all the time. I practically live on Google like so many other people do.
Okay. Yeah, for sure.
But you ever think about how powerful Google is? Almost like it's it's sort of like monopoly. I mean, there are other search engines out there, but they're so pervasive in our everyday life that if their algorithms, unintentional or not, they can really shape how people think about a lot of different topics. You know, and if they think that something isn't a good topic to discuss, they could sort of hide it away in their algorithm. And not just Google, any tech company could do that. Facebook, for example, could do that as well.
Scarier than that, I think, is Amazon, because they own the algorithm of what we will see when we go shopping. They own it.
Yeah.
They are now building a whole separate algorithm for people to learn the algorithm to be able to even get noticed, because anybody can sell something on Amazon. I can sell what they sell at Target, put a different name on it, then drive to Target, pick it up, ship it, and it comes from my Amazon store. I mean, I'd get sued eventually. But the point is, you know, that's a scare to me. That's scarier, because that's us not just putting our eyes behind it, but putting our money behind it without recognizing why did it suggest this product. Because if I'm doing something, I'm gonna create something that says send all your money to people named Jackie Clayton who live on Amlo Street in Waco, and that doesn't mean, you know, it's just one of those things that you know that people inherently are selfish and want things to benefit them. They're not going to program something that would not benefit them, and it's unconscious, right? Kate Bischoff said, instead of writing a perfect algorithm, because that's probably not possible, you just need to keep testing the algorithm to make sure it doesn't have discriminatory results. She said, test, 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 baby. That's my Kate Bischoff impression.
That's probably the best solution there. And, you know, I know we talked a lot about the doom and gloom around some of these algorithms turning evil. But on a positive note, I can see how they could really be used as a force for good in a lot of different scenarios. But as it pertains to recruiting, imagine an algorithm like, I don't know, Crystal Knows, for example.
Right.
That, for those who don't know, you look up crystalknows.com. It's a Chrome extension that will, if you find someone on Twitter and you have the Crystal Knows extension in your browser, then it will give you a personality assessment of that Twitter user. So then you know best how to engage them. Okay, so imagine you had an algorithm like that, and you have all the knowledge that Google knows about us. What if a company could say, you know what, I want to find passive candidates, and I don't want to even write a job description. I want to create dynamic job descriptions. So here's the basic information of the job. Now you magic algorithms go out and you find people who have experience at the high potential of being who I want, and then you pitch a job description that is perfectly tailored for that particular person. You know, whether they're African American, whether they're female, whether they're male, whether they're whatever. You know, that will be something that I think would be awesome, kind of scary too, but also kind of awesome. What do you think of that? Is that too crazy an idea?
No, it's not. In fact, there's a company that's doing it, Kansas City Children's Hospital. It's in Kansas. It might not be Kansas City. Anyway, so what they did, and this was smart, they let people, it's one of the best places to work in the city, and so they gave people the option of introducing themselves, and it's called Introduce Yourself. Like, if you're interested in working at our company, you can record a video and, you know, just say, hi, my name, and they'll ask, you know, different kind of questions like, why do you think you'd want to work here, blah, 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 blah. And it uses a particular product that does recognition of hand motions, eyes, mouth to see what it is, and it'll identify them as a perfect candidate for their company in various roles. And so and so it matches roles that they have on site already without applying for a job at all. So it also kind of sideswipes all those different rules where you have to apply and have to have a certain number, and then they didn't apply officially for a job. but it'll alert you like, hey, this person would be great for this role that you have in your company. Now, you may not have a role available, but then you start your engagement from that point to do it. So I think that's helpful. Of like you were saying, like, you know, utilizing something like Crystal Knows, some other tools. Chuck Solomon, thanks for being here, and he said there were a couple other companies, Textio, which we know that helps with the job descriptions to make sure that your job doesn't slant one way or another. Even as simple as saying, dude, this is a great job, might not resonate in New Jersey as much as it would in California. It will tell you in real time. And then it said blinded HR, and I'm not familiar with blinded HR, but they're saying those are some companies that were taking the time to try to resolve some of the hiring bias. But I don't think that what you're saying is too far off, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think as you said that, it made me think about a company that Randstad is invested in, Pymetrics, and it's an online assessment tool. Basically what happens is you go online and you play these really short video games, and then as you play these games, it's testing to see how well you solve problems, things like that. And then as you play the game, it could tell you, hey, this person who played this game will be a good candidate for this job because our assessment is that they have the basic skills needed to excel in this particular role. You know, companies like Goldman Sachs, Unilever is what I'm thinking of particularly. Unilever used a tool like that to place 450 people last year. You know, just basically take this online test, play these games online, and then once you score at a certain level, then we'll reach out and talk to you at that point. And so I thought that was really cool because it was basically using an algorithm, and it wasn't biased in the standpoint of how can you be biased against a video game? Either you win or you lose. You know,
right.
That kind of. So yeah, I'm sorry. Hopefully I answered your question. That popped in my head when you were talking about that.
No, I understand. I think that we need to get together and just write an article about some of the other things that we've seen. I know Unilever uses Pymetrics in conjunction with HireVue as well to try to make sure that they are using data in their hiring. And the stats that they had were shocking as far as the computer being like 98% accurate with all of their hires being successful, or staying in the job, or you know, the ones that they hired. And then people that they hired outside of the algorithms and the data that was presented, 100% failed at the company.
Wow.
100%. When they hired, when the computer said they're not a good fit, and they said, well, I like them, I want them to work, 100% did not work out at the company.
Wow. That's interesting. That's interesting.
This is part of a longer conversation. I will tell you that, you know, it is 12:33. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's always being aware of these things, and it's uncomfortable. I mean, but we have to notice the patterns. I want to give you the last word before we click off, but anything else that you want to add, and don't feel rushed, like anything you want to make sure that a point that you want to get across before we end?
Don't be afraid or freaked out by the algorithms. There's still time because we are aware of it, and we can make noise and make the changes now. I think if we learn about these things and do nothing, then you should be afraid, because it's going to impact your life if you don't stand up and say something.
I appreciate you.
Appreciate you too. Virtual hug. Virtual hug.
Everybody, Dan and Allison and Kate and Chuck and everyone that is here, I appreciate you being here. I know there's plenty more that we can discuss it. We'll have to like partner up on something and share more of the information as we find it. But I appreciate y'all for being here, and I will see you guys next Friday. Thanks. Bye, Jim.
Bye-bye.